KFMU DJ Eli Campbell here. One thing that makes Steamboat special is how many awe-inspiring people call our valley home. You could find yourself in line at the coffee shop next to an Olympian or sitting on the gondola next to the founder of a world-renowned business. Our community produces and attracts the best of the best in their respective fields, but most are so humble about it you would never know. These extraordinary people are the common folk in the boat. Welcome to Common Folk in the Boat. I'm Eli Campbell from 104.1, 105.5 KFMU. This is our series of interviews of business leaders and entrepreneurs and people that have just really made the Steamboat Springs community special. And when I started this series, some of the people that I thought of immediately that I wanted to try to interview are our guests today. And I'd like to waste no time to get to them, but I have to introduce Dave Whitlinger of Billo, our sponsor. How's that for an introduction?
Thanks a lot. That was fantastic. I don't want to waste your time, but I'm going to waste your time.
That's how I treat our sponsors. No, we really appreciate the support of Billo. You are one of the main reasons that we decided to launch this series to begin with. You and I collaborated on this idea, so I don't want to treat you too poorly. We always like to start every single episode with kind of the idea of what is making Billo feel high on. What are you positive about? And if I can make you laugh while you're doing it, that's even better.
Exactly. You always make me laugh, but looks aren't everything. So you asked, what is Billo high on? Okay. Boy, right now I'll tell you the coolest thing is we just hired a new at the lab. We've hired a new director of in our lab for extraction. So all those lovely concentrates, vapes, wax, shatter, batter. I know your eyes are glazing over right now. You're like, what, Dave? Huh? What happened to just joints?
Yeah.
So no, we've hired a new guy. Britt Murphy is his name. He comes from Bins, which makes very high end, edible chocolate, infused chocolates. Has a huge long list of pedigree of other places he's worked. So we're thrilled to have somebody new in the extraction lab. And I think what that's going to mean for Billo is that we're going to have a whole new series of products coming out, whether they're infused pre-rolls that we're talking about, different types of concentrates, things like that. So beyond just community related, at least internally, that's what we're high on right now.
Very cool. And that's stuff that as it comes out, I'm sure we'll be talking more about on future episodes.
Yeah, I think we should sample.
That could make our interview series that much more entertaining. So, no, as I said, our guests today are people that when I originally thought of who we'd like to bring on, it was the concept was how you could be sitting on the gondola and not know that you're sitting next to the founders of an internationally renowned brand. And that's the type of people that Steamboat attracts, the doers and the thinkers in our world. And our guests today are people that have done this. They embody this idea by starting not just one, but two different well-known merino wool apparel brands. We want to welcome Peter and Patty Duke to the couch. Well, welcome. How are you guys?
Good,
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to go back about, 3 or 4 decades ago. You guys were ski bums from the East Coast who ventured out west, and something made you land in Steamboat. So before you started merino wool apparel companies, you were just the typical common ski bum of Steamboat. But what made it here in Steamboat? What was it attractive to you that made you stop here?
Well, if I may, I don't really enjoy that term ski bum.
Okay.
So actually, I taught skiing at a very high level and ran different ski schools in the country. And I was on a PSIA national team. So I kind of think myself a little bit higher than a ski bum. Yeah. But skiing as a bum got me into ski instruction. So,
there you go.
Yeah. So how did we get to Steamboat? So my last stint as a director of skiing was at Heavenly Valley in Lake Tahoe. And in 1984, I decided to call it quits. My boys were getting a little older, and it was time to get into business. So I said to Patty, let's make some ski hats. And eventually we knew we wanted to live in Colorado. And Hans Geyer who hired me at Heavenly Valley, was now the president of Steamboat. And I said, Pat, let's go to Steamboat. And that's how we got here.
Yeah. And what is it that made you want to stay here?
Well, I just back up a little bit. I
Yeah.
am not a ski bum either. Just saying. And I like to ski. I liked being with him because he could teach me how to ski better, and he was great help and a wonderful guy. And so we were in Stowe, Vermont, and I had my own interior design business called By Design. And then we moved to Tahoe and I had babies, so I worked for another design company. So I always kept that up and skied when I could. Coming to when we were ready to leave Tahoe, we needed to go somewhere that had snow on a good mountain, and we couldn't go back east. It was too far. So halfway was here in Colorado with beautiful skiing, and we were making hats for Keystone. And so we figured, well, we're in a good place, and we knew Hans, and he was very key.
Yeah, and I agree with you about the ski bum term because I came here as a skier, but I was not a bum. I was a professional. In fact, it was Dave who hired me at the radio station for
Yeah.
my very first job.
Yeah,
back
yeah,
then.
but I was loud and proud. I was a bum.
You would call me a bum probably back then too.
Well, we're all,
Lucky.
in one form or another, we're all bums.
Yeah, exactly. But as ski instructors, eventually you realize that if you're out on the mountain all day, your feet are getting cold, and you decide that you need to find a solution to this. I'm curious because back then in the 80s and 90s, wool was no longer a prevalent fabric that was used in the ski industry. It had been in the early days of skiing, but that wool was absorbent, it was itchy, it was bulky. What made you turn back to wool to kind of find the solution to the problem of cold feet?
Well, that's me.
That's you.
Well, I could say this, that I was one of those people that wore those old wool itchy socks, and my feet were comfortable in it from a warmth perspective. But then in the 70s, late 70s, synthetics came into the market, and they created a beautiful marketing term about wicking. And they really did a great job saying, we move the moisture off your foot, and therefore your feet are dry, you're going to be comfortable. And actually, when we moved to Steamboat, I got caught in just that marketing campaign. And I bought 2 or 3 pair of these synthetic ski socks, and my feet were the coldest they ever were wearing those synthetics. And at the end of each day, this is true, I would take my ski boots off, take the bladder out, turn the boot upside down, and water just spilled out. I was
Yeah.
Yeah.
that close to calling up the ski boot company and telling them how bad their product was. But that summer is when we were introduced to merino wool. We made merino wool socks as a kind of a see what it's like. Same ski boots, same environment, different socks, put them on, no more water out of the boots, and my feet were comfortable again.
Yeah.
And that's how we got into it.
No more leaky boots.
No more leaky boots. Is that your original motto? It should have been.
And that wasn't really
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, so then you started a company. It was Smartwool,
Yeah.
and at that time, I'm wondering, what was the perception of people who you talk to your friends, your neighbors, and skiers, and you say we're going to bring wool back into the ski industry. What was their
They
reaction?
didn't get it. They
Yeah.
didn't get it. And they didn't get the name. Smartwool. What does that mean? Well, it's smart because it does all these qualities, and it keeps your feet dry, and it keeps you warm when you're cold, and cool when you're hot, and it's wool. So that's the name. And people would come to a show and they'd want to kind of see what we're about, and they were questioning and questioning, and Peter got mad. He reached behind me, grabbed a pair of socks. He says, just put them on your feet and come back and see me. Next day, we're trying to sell the next person. Those people would come back and they go, oh my God, they're like doing this to my feet. They're wonderful. And they sold the people that were sitting down that we're trying to sell. We thought, oh, we need to give away socks.
Yeah, and Smartwool, I mean, I remember my first pair of Smartwool socks from the mid to late 90s, and you went from an industry where wool wasn't prevalent to now it's hard to find a skier, a winter sports enthusiast who's not wearing merino wool as a sock or a base layer. So
Right.
not only did you start a brand, you almost jump-started an entire industry. Do you ever take time to kind of reflect on where you went from ski instructors with cold feet to where this industry is now?
Nah, not really.
Yeah.
Just just enjoying the ride, I guess. And
Yeah.
that's about it.
Too busy to reflect on anything.
Yeah, we got other things to deal with,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
other mountains to climb.
And then over time, after a decade or so, you'd built this brand and it was time to move on. And, you were leaving Smartwool. Did you ever have the idea that after leaving, you would get back into the industry?
No,
No.
No,
I,
I would
I,
say no.
I would say no. But if you really want to know why we got back in there, Smallville was pissing us off, and they were upsetting us because they were doing things that in when we sold the company, we told them you need to go in this direction, and they refused to listen to us. And hence they came out with their version. And if you recall, there was a time when their socks were falling apart within days of buying them.
Yeah.
And I was being told that there were boxes and boxes coming in every day for returns. My friends were calling us up, and I looked over to Patty and I said, "We got to get back into this because this is not good."
Yeah.
My
So
experience was we had time walking the streets downtown. People would stop me. They know who I was. I sold them socks before. They'd lift up their pant leg. They'd show me their socks wearing out. They'd show me holes and runs, and they were a mess. I said, "Oh." And they said, "Well, why is this happening?" I said, "Well, I'm not sure, but I'll figure it out." And so that's what got us going into like, well, maybe there's a place for us to come back with a better product.
yeah,
I think it's no secret that there was certainly a time where the merino wool sock had a reputation of becoming holy real quick. It worked, it kept your feet warm, it was comfortable enough, but it just did not last. And I think there was a time for the price point of those socks too. Specifically, you wanted something that would last over a more than at least one season.
yes.
And especially for someone like myself back then, not anymore, but back then I was skiing 100 days a year and I was really using the socks and I couldn't get through an entire season without holes in them.
Right.
It was about the construction and what they did to the construction. And we figured out what it was and how to make it better.
So you decide that you can do it better. You found this. You think you found the solution, and I asked you what the reaction was from people when you first got into it. Did they understand? Did people understand when you wanted to get back into it at a time where one of your biggest competitors would be a company that you had already started?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Everybody always tells you when you start a business, don't do it.
Yeah.
What are you nuts?
Exactly. But we knew how to make it better, and that was technology. When I left Smartwool, I was already researching new technology, and they hadn't perfected it yet, but it was on the drawing boards, and the timing was absolutely perfect when we got back into it with point six, and we introduced some new methods that some companies are now using and other companies are not, but they're not doing the whole enchilada as what we're doing
Yeah.
because quite frankly, it's costs more money to make the socks the way we make them now. But when you have controllers saying, "Nah, we don't want to spend the extra money," what happens is the product doesn't get better.
All right.
So we're willing to do that.
Basically, we believed that we knew what we had to do and then we could do it.
Yeah. And you guys are people that you live the lifestyle, you live the brand. And
Yeah.
so you knew what the Sox needed to stand up to, and what people in the mountain towns like Steamboat or any mountain town across the country would want to get out of their socks. Can you talk a little bit about how that inspired what you were trying to put into the Point Six brand?
Yes. So, how to describe our socks compared to other socks? Something simple that most people can look at. If you take a brand new pair of socks and hold it up to the light, and you look down the sock, you'll see these fuzzies.
Yeah.
That's their socks. You take our socks and hold it up, no fuzzies. And that is because of compact spinning. And when you spin yarn and it comes down the reel and it twists like this, centrifugal force starts to throw the ends of the wool to the outside, hence the fuzzies. These fuzzies start to get caught on the boot, they get rubbed out, and they start to pull out, and it pills the sock.
Yeah.
Compact spinning, you have the same scenario where it spins like this, and you have centrifugal force. For the physics majors out there, the compact spinning applies centripetal force that sucks the circle back into the middle and pulls the loose ends into the center of the sock, hence no more fuzzies. That's more expensive, but that's how you create durability in the sock.
And that is, I mean, there's so much more that goes into putting a sock together than I
Yes.
would have ever thought. I mean,
Yes.
that is unbelievable that it gets down to just the way that you even spin the wool.
Yes.
And the wool that you buy.
Yeah.
And how you specify type of wool and how it's mixed. There's a lot.
Yeah. And we also introduced something else, which was additional technology, which is they call it, well, it's the toe seam. Okay, if you recall back in the early days, you always had a toe seam across
Yep.
the sock, and it always irritated the top of your toes. So I knew that they were the manufacturers of the machines were developing what they call stitch by stitch, and so the stitch by stitch basically eliminates that toe seam and does it right on the machine. And we were the first to do it. We introduced it. And then all the other boys said, oh, Jesus, we got to do it too. They didn't want to do it because they had to buy new machines, et cetera, et cetera. But it costs more to do, but no more toe seam.
And I have to thank you for that, because that is, I mean, of all of the different technological things that you're talking about, I think that's the one that added the most comfort, that is tangible to
Yeah.
the user. I can see there's no toe seam there that is going to rub
And
across the
the
knuckle.
ends of the seam, there were little balls.
Yeah.
That would dig in.
Yeah. And it was,
No more.
and when you have it in a tight ski boot, and you're wearing it all day,
El Hurto.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I've been curious. I had a conversation a number of years ago with another entrepreneur in Steamboat in the outdoor industry, and he's got a very successful brand. But he had told me a couple years ago that if he was restarting his company now, he wouldn't do it because the barriers to entry were too great with the competition. When he started his brand, there wasn't much competition. Here you are with Point Six, where you've created the industry, as we've talked about almost. There's competition all over the place, and you're overcoming those barriers to entry and still making not now a second relevant brand in the outdoor industry, apparel space. What was that like to really kind of see that you're no longer at the forefront of the industry? Now you're coming in and you have the bigger competition to deal with.
Competition never turned me away.
Yeah.
I thrive on competition, so it doesn't bother me one bit. I just know that to compete, it's like any sport, baseball, whatever, there's a lot of competition out there. The idea is to be better than the next guy, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, you understood your competitive advantages.
I
Yes,
think a lot of that probably comes from innovation too. Like you said, you're not just the next Johnny come lately who's back into the industry making the same old sock. It sounds like you're pushing the barriers of technology, you're pushing all sorts of different ways of thinking to produce a better product, and I think that that's where brands in general are going to win, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's us. So yeah,
And so, we've talked about a lot in the ski industry, and that's where you guys have a background. But merino wool is a product that is used across many different outdoor activities now,
yes.
hiking and biking, and expanding beyond the skiing industry. What is it specifically? We've talked kind of about the merino wool and the competitive advantages of point six, but what is it specifically about the point six sock that makes it so great and so versatile across so many different activities?
Well, I think that, wool in general is what allows you to expand beyond cold weather. And that, when we started Smartwool, that was one barrier we had to overcome because people understood wool to be warmer. They didn't understand that it would be cooler as
Right.
well. And so it became an educational process. And so we had to educate people about why wool keeps you cool in the summertime. And that was the triggering point of how did I come up with the name Smartwool, because it was like a computer chip wool. It knew it was cold outside and your body needs warmth. It knew it was hot outside and your body needed to be cool. And it was all about how it manages moisture. So what wool actually does, it pulls the moisture off your foot in vapor form, and it actually absorbs the moisture in the sock. Okay, and then it evaporates it out, and that's what keeps your feet cool or warm. So if you take synthetics that talk about wicking, see, this is an educational section. But as you wick the moisture, if you understand synthetic, it's an oil-based product. Think of oil on the ocean. They just don't mix.
Oil and water.
Oil and water.
Yeah.
So if it's wicking the moisture away from your foot, where does it go? It goes through the sock and to your shoe. Do you remember that explanation about the ski boot with the
Into your
water?
leaky boots.
That's right.
Right.
And so if the moisture gets to your shoe, whichever, if you're a runner, a cyclist, a skier, whatever it may be, the outside temperatures then act on that wet shoe. If
Yeah.
it's cold out, the shoe's cold, your foot's cold. If it's hot out, the shoe's hot, your foot's hot.
Right.
And wool absolutely absorbs it and evaporates it. And through the evaporation process, okay, you also don't create stink because bacteria grows in moisture where it pools.
Yeah.
And so with the synthetic socks and it goes to the shoe, it pools, it creates bacteria, you got stinky socks. That's why you can wear wool socks forever and ever and it won't stink.
And that's important for the true ski bums.
Yeah.
True experience that will support that.
Yeah.
So when we first began Smartwell, I I gave away socks and I ended up on this. Well, actually, first the hiking sock was what brought us into the world, brought us into knowledge. And we got a knock on our door after a show from Backpacker Magazine. I said, oh, they want us to advertise. We've only been to one show, but it was a Backpacker Editor's Choice Award for the hiking and the trekking sock. So now people wanted to know about it. And so we're at a show. And at the show, I learned of a gal who had breast cancer, was climbing up Aconcagua, and I had breast cancer as well. And she was taking women with breast cancer up the mountain with support team. And so I got on that team. So off we go onto this, and I am wearing my Smartwool socks. And this is Peter's story. So I slip and a foot goes into the water in the stream. Now you're in a line of people. You can't stop. You keep going. I'm like, okay, it's not very nice out. It's cold and I'm just got to keep going. And I felt that it was wet for a couple of minutes. And then I didn't think about it anymore at all. It was still wet at the end of the day, but it functioned and it kept my body temperature. So it's like, okay,
And so that was for you a personal experience early
personal.
on that made you
Yeah.
understand how to better sell the product. And you're living in an area amongst people that are incredibly active, not just the weekend warriors, but
True.
Dave was telling us a story earlier off air about how he did a whole bike packing trip with point six as your chosen apparel and how well it functioned.
Yeah, and it was I don't know if you said this or not, but as a local here in Steamboat, we're all very active, and yet we're all very choosy about the brands that I'm going to spend my hard-earned money on. And so I did it partly to test point six because I'd worn your socks, but it was really the first time I had been experimenting with your base layers and some of your other apparel beyond just the footwear. And I did it intentionally to see, well, how is this going to perform? So I took nothing but point six with me. That was head to toe, including into the evening. And I remember, and I'm not making this up because you're sitting right next to me, it was very vivid in my mind that it was hot that day and I was sweating, but I felt really cool and comfortable. And then, of course, as we get in this area, the sun goes down, the cold weather comes in. I'm camping, in a very minimalist, camp setup. And I had the point six on and it kept me warm at night. And I'm like, how is this merino wool so darn good that it knows when I'm hot? And so that is an honest to God truth. And so I'm a customer for life at this point.
Oh, good.
So
Till you screw it up.
So there's a point to be made here is that it is not just for extreme athletes or for biking or something that is a sport, but it's also for a person walking down the street that might get their feet wet and they're shopping and they just going to stay comfortable. It might be for you're walking on the golf course and it's wet and you'll stay comfortable. So it's for every fact of life. It's not just for athletes.
Yeah, as what Patty is referring to is if you wear a suit to go to work, you do need to be a merino sock so your wife accepts you back in the house after you finish your day's work.
I've got my point six socks on right now, and I'm not doing anything active today. I'm sitting on a couch, but I've got my socks on, so of course. Now, the original company you started left Steamboat a couple of years ago. You guys, I'm sure there's challenges to running a large business in a small town like this, especially when you think about manufacturing and warehousing and all of these things. But your headquarters have remained in Steamboat as you've grown the brand. How important is that to you to still be Steamboat based and family based, with the community being part of the family?
Well, we weren't going to leave Steamboat,
It's
period.
home.
Yeah.
We're mountain people. The snow's beautiful here. We like to ski. Um, uh, there was no need to leave. And so our boys are here, our grandchildren are here, and to leave would be foolish. So it's just, putting the puzzle together and kind of figuring it out.
Yeah.
I know that the old company didn't want to hang around here too much longer and they boogied out of here. So I guess they upset some people locally. Yeah.
Well, we we have people employed that are here in Steamboat, but most are not here in Steamboat, and that's the joy of today's world. And we've actually don't have our office space anymore. We work remotely at home, which we all kind of really like a lot.
Yeah.
You have the advantage of Zoom and all those meetings you can have online. And we have people back east and we have people down in Grand Junction and we're just everywhere. So it doesn't matter if we find the right person for the right job and they live in Boulder, great.
Right.
And we don't want to upset their lifestyle either.
And
So
everybody's happy. They have
Yeah.
their own home like we have our home. And then we get together and make things happen.
Yeah.
I have to imagine too that when you're talking about any outdoor brand, it pays to be in an outdoor community like us from a mere product testing, developing. I mean, heck, if you have something new that you want to try out, what better place than Steamboat Springs to put them on your feet, put them on your back, and go give it a true life test right here without having to do a whole lot.
Yeah.
Right, on the trail, anything. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
great.
It's just kind of like a starting point, and people just go, they go to our neighboring states to do different activities depending upon the time of year. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's just great.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for taking some time to chat with us today. It's always been amazing to me. This is the first time that we've met. I've lived in town for 25 years. This was the first time I've had the pleasure of meeting you, but I've heard the names Peter and Patty Duke for years. It's always been amazing to me how you started Smartwool. You were the founders of Smartwool, and then you moved on to now bring point 0.6 into the industry, and the quality, I like I said, I'm wearing my point 0.6 socks nearly daily. I do, and I love the product, and how you just kind of started as ski instructors here in Steamboat, and what you were able to grow from there. And as we say, you were just kind of some of the common folk of the boat. So thank
That's
you
it.
very
Well,
much.
thank you very much. It's a
Yeah.
pleasure for us to be able to share it with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, and thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.